Almost 3 years after he proposed a measure on gun laws after the mass shooting in Dayton, Republican Senator Matt Dolan is back with a 5-point plan on guns. This one includes some elements of his previous bill, but it does not include universal background checks or a ban on gun sales to people under 21. Two ideas that polls show are overwhelmingly supported, even by gun owners. Dolan's bill creates a due process safety protection order, allowing a judge to order the seizure of firearms from a person deemed to be a danger to themselves or others because of mental health issues. It requires a co-signer for buyers who are 18 to 21 years old. That person could be held civilly liable if the gun is used in a felony. It brings back a proposal from the previous bill, allowing buyers to request background checks from sheriff's offices to show to sellers, but it does not make it mandatory. It requires law enforcement to enter enhanced background check information into state and federal databases by the end of the next business day. And it puts $175 million in federal American Rescue Plan money into increasing the number of mental health workers and the expansion of regional mental health centers. I talked to Senator Dolan about why he's proposing this plan now, since his previous plan went nowhere. When I talked to you about this bill, when you introduced it, we talked about it being a mental health bill rather than a Second Amendment bill. That's kind of the way that you see it, that this really addresses some of the mental health issues, not just the Second Amendment concerns.
Well, I don't think this violates the Second Amendment at all. But what is uniform, when we have these tragic events, everyone agrees that the individual who unfortunately committed suicide or committed homicide had mental health issues. That's what this bill is trying to do. If you have mental health issues and you are a violent threat to yourself or others, we want to separate you from your guns. The other universal truth that everyone accepts is that in Ohio, we already say, if you are mentally ill, we don't want you to buy a gun. We understand the problems of somebody who's suffering from mental illness and a gun. 2923.135 says no guns if you're mentally ill. This bill simply says if you've purchased a gun and now have that disability, we want to separate you just like the law says you couldn't get it before.
One of the provisions would be a co-signer for buyers of guns who are 18 to 21 years old. You don't ban the purchases of guns by anyone under 21. You just require a co-signer. And perhaps the immaturity level of some people in that 18 to 21-year-old area is part of that. But Buckeye Firearms Association says that they think that provision is unconstitutional and blatant and arbitrary discrimination. Tell me about why you have that provision in there, and do you think that it might violate the Constitution?
Well, no, I don't. I mean, we pass laws based on age all the time. You can't vote until you're 18. You can't drink alcohol until you're 21. You can't rent a car until you're 25. You can't rent a hotel room. You can't get you're entitled to your retirement funds until you're a certain age. So, no. The other factor in this is it's not just the immaturity. It's a recognition that maybe at 18 and 19 you don't have a record, a criminal record, but you might have some emotional immaturity. Look at what happened in Texas. That young man at 18, on his 18th birthday, went and bought a gun, and 4 or 5 days later he used it to kill children.
And Uvalde.
Now, I also would remind gun owners that we already say to folks, you can't buy a handgun until you're 21 years old. So again, Ohio has laws that uniformly accept the concept that between 18 and under 21, we're going to put additional burdens on you. My bill just simply says, if you want to buy a handgun, you still need a co-signer. So my bill actually expands the ability for an 18 to under 21. We just want a responsible adult to co-sign.
Buckeye Firearms is also concerned about your seller's protection certificate. Right now in the bill, it is voluntary, and you've even told me that you think it might potentially close the gun show loophole because it allows for those private transactions to happen. Why isn't it mandatory? Why is it something that's voluntary?
Because I believe that, first of all, you have to have the political what can pass, and second is as you study this issue, what people don't understand is we already have disabilities in Ohio that say you cannot have a gun if you have these 7 to 8 disabilities. So we've already recognized people should not have guns. What this says to a seller is, look, if you want protection from this sale and you are concerned about your buyer, then you have the ability to go get a certificate, have the buyer go get a certificate, and then say, yes, I did my due diligence. So if something happens to if that person was disabled, should not have had a gun, they're protected. So it is a choice of the seller. If they don't, and that person ultimately did have a disability, then they face liability themselves. So it is giving the seller of a gun and a non-federally licensed the ability to protect themselves. It also makes it very clear we're not talking about family transfers. We're not talking about grandson to granddaughter. We're talking about folks who go to these gun shows and make a substantial portion of their living selling guns.
$175 million in American Rescue Plan money is in this for regional mental health centers and the mental health workforce to stand those up and build those up. That is one-time money. And what happens when that money is done and these centers are in existence? You have this workforce. This is now, isn't that potentially a burden on counties or other entities to try to operate those facilities that the one-time money has stood up?
Well, one-time money would go towards the brick and mortars. And I think what you're going to find when you talk to the counties is they're okay with this because they have a great deal of their local dollars going to their local jails, in which 20 to 25% of those folks are sitting in jail who need mental health and are not getting it. This would allow them to be removed from the local jail, to go to a regional crisis center to get the help that they need, so that they can be functioning adults in society. Forget that they don't commit a tragedy. I mean, we have mental health folks, we have people who suffer from mental illness who are in no way a violent threat. And if that's the case, my bill doesn't even apply to them at all. Zero. It's only that additional element that there's suicidal or homicidal evidence that we want to do, that this bill will take in place. So I think what you're going to see is the additional mental health workers, the infrastructure to provide them will allow schools, hospitals, clinics to have the ability to have mental health workers available to them.
This is an election year for the entire House, for half the Senate, also for the governor and the 4 other statewide executive office holders. I know you've traveled the state, you said, talking to people when you were running for U.S. Senate, and got the sense that these ideas are workable, that people are supportive of them. But this is a legislature that just passed permitless concealed carry and allowing teachers to be armed in school. What's the real hope that this goes anywhere, especially when the legislature's not coming back until November?
Well, again, because it's an election year, issues will percolate to the top. And I believe this will be one of the issues that will percolate. And so, my peers will be out there deciding, whoa, I'm hearing from constituents that this is a vote that they're concerned with. It's going to affect my vote for them. The other thing I tell my peers all the time is I was the one that helped Governor DeWine with Strong Ohio. I stood for re-election, and I won overwhelmingly. So people, when they cast their ballot, I think most of all what people want right now is they want to see that their government can have a mature conversation about a very volatile issue, and that we can talk about public safety, mental health, and responsible gun ownership, and come up with a plan that is workable, that protects people, that we don't violate the Second Amendment, but we actually get something done. And I think that's what people are really craving.
Though the Buckeye Firearms Association did have a statement not long after the bill was dropped, there was no response to emails requesting an interview for this show.